Alright, hello Algebra 1. So this is just a little extra of how you actually get the quadratic formula because I didn't want to clutter up the main video with something that you were probably going to fast forward ahead through anyway. So if you wanted a little explanation of where it comes from, here's how you get the quadratic formula. If you were looking at the going, why is that a 2 or why is that a 4? Okay, here's why. So if we're looking at just a generic equation that looks like this. So if we've got an x squared and an x and something else, we're going to go ahead and complete the square on it, but with letters. So if you think back to when we were doing completing the square, if there's a number out here, we're going to go ahead and divide by that first. So I'm just going to divide everything by a. Now, conveniently, that cancels out this, so we've got an x squared there, plus a b over a times x plus a c over a, and 0 over a, 0 divided by anything is just 0. Okay, now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to scoot that c over a over to the other side. So now I've got an x squared plus a b over a. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a blank there, equals a negative c over a, not z. Okay, now if we think back to when we were completing the square on things, we said we always want this number in order to get a perfect square. We want it to be half of this number squared. So half of this number, half of b over a, is just going to be a b over 2a. Because if we take half of something, that's the same thing as dividing by 2. And if we divide by 2, we can just multiply it by 1/2. So just stick a 2 down there, and now we're going to square that. But if we do that to this side, and I should have left myself a little bit more room over here. If we do that to this side, we've now got a negative c over a here. We got to add a b over 2a squared to this side. So anytime we add something over here, we got to add it over here. Now, the reason we wanted this in the first place is now we can take this and rewrite it as an x plus a b over 2a squared. This side we gotta fiddle around with a little bit to get it to be something we can add. Because remember, if we're adding fractions, we need a common denominator. So, I'm gonna assume that's what you said. Now, b squared is just b squared. 2a squared is gonna be a 4a squared. And in order to get that to be a common denominator, if we've got an a here and a 4a squared over here, I'm going to take this times 4a. But if we take the bottom times 4a, we got to take the top times 4a. And now I'm going to scoot this over to a new whiteboard. So we still got our x plus b over 2a squared over here. And now we've got a 4a squared on the bottom. And if we add that negative c times a 4a plus b squared, I'm going to flip-flop that around a little bit and call it a b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to call that b squared minus 4ac. Because remember, if we're adding, we can just flip-flop the order as long as that negative stays with what it was with. Okay, now, the reason we wanted a perfect square over here in the first place is now we can square root it. So I'm just going to pick a different color and draw a big square root around everything. Now, technically, when we're square rooting things, we're going to end up with a positive and a negative. But I'm not going to do that on all of them. I'm just going to do that on the top one over here. Because technically you could have a plus and minus over here, you could have a plus and minus on top over here, you have a plus and minus on the bottom over here, but if we, say, have a minus here and a minus here and a minus here, that's really the same thing as having one of them. Because anytime I've got two of them, they cancel out. So all of our combinations can be taken care of with one of these, and I'm just going to leave it as the one up here. So this is going to be an x plus a b over 2a equals, I'm going to call this a plus a minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over that square root of 4a squared. But the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of a squared is 8. because that's how we got that in the first place. Okay. This is looking nicer. So now we've just got to take this and we're going to scoot it over here. So we're going to subtract a b over 2a. But instead of, b over 2a. But instead of putting it at the end, I'm just going to put it at the start. The reason I'm going to put it at the start and the reason the formula ends up with it at the start is because if you subtract a b at the end, it's really easy to just draw that square root on a bit too far and make it look like it's going over the b too. So that's why it's going out front. So remember that it's not inside that square root. So now we've got our x equals, and I'm going to call this a negative b out front here, and then plus minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Ding. And that is how you get the quadratic formula, because we can just add these two because they already have the same common denominator. So that's where that's coming from, just so you know that we didn't pull this formula out of thin air. I mean, there's not a homework assignment that goes with this video, but just in case you wanted to know that this is where it came from, it didn't come out of nowhere. It actually comes from doing the complete square thing on something with just variables. So that's where that formula is coming from.